Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. We are joined this week, and I want to jump right into the show. Senate Floor Leader Mike Kehoe, welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Glad to be here, and thanks for having me on.
So the issue that I always think of when we're talking is transportation. There's been a commission, an interim commission set up to study transportation. Doesn't it come down to, do you have enough statesmen in the Senate to actually address the problem with money?
Well, I haven't found anybody, whether they're an elected official or just the average person you talk to in the coffee shop, that's not concerned about transportation right now. That most people realize that we as a state are in a deficit as it comes to transportation. You know, we have the 7th largest infrastructure system in the United States, but we're 47th in funding. And if nobody understands any numbers, if you just remember those two, that just doesn't work. So there are plenty of people in the Capitol, I think, that would like to figure out a plan to move this forward. As you know, we have an interim committee, a transportation task force going on right now. Coincidentally, I talked to both Senator Schatz, who is our chairman of transportation this morning, as well as Representative Corlew, who is the leader in the House on this issue. And they're working very hard. They've had many meetings, they're receiving input from all kinds of stakeholders. And Representative Corlew just said to me on the phone, he said, there's not a lot of different solutions in what you've been talking about. I said, that's the issue, is that there's not a magic wand. There's 3 or 4 ways that you can core transportation funding is made up of, and we just need to decide which one is best for Missourians.
So when I think of transportation, yourself, Senator Schatz, Senator Leibler, it's usually men that have run businesses that I hear talking about transportation. To me, it's an interesting thing. You have an asset that's depreciating, and if you don't fund the maintenance of that asset, it's going to depreciate, and that's not conservative.
No, it's not conservative, and it's interesting. For one, transportation and economic development go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other, and if we want to be this open state that is wanting existing businesses to grow and new businesses to consider to come here, because we have a vast transportation network between rivers, roads, our ports, our railroad system, this is something we really need to expand on and grow. And from a conservative point of view, the last time our transportation funding was raised was in the early '90s under a very liberal governor named John Ashcroft, which I say that in jest. Obviously, Governor Ashcroft was incredibly conservative. And just recently, I've had a chance to talk to him personally about transportation. I said, listen, there's a lot of conservatives who say they don't want to raise taxes to fund transportation. Yet you, as one of the most conservative, heartfelt Missourians I know, did it in your tenure. And he was, as Governor Ashcroft, or General Ashcroft is, he's always has very wise words when you listen to him. And he said, I thought the less conservative approach was knowing there was a problem and doing nothing. And so I thought that was a pretty simple yet conservative answer.
Let's talk about an issue in Kansas City. So your time in the Senate has saw more Republicans elected than at any time in the history of the state. There's a special election to replace Senator Krause in Jackson County. The Democrats pulled a pretty slick move. They got a fringe candidate on the ballot. Is that race close, and are you going to win it?
We are going to win it. Representative Sirpoy is running for that special election in Senate 8. Mike has done a great job representing his constituents in his House district. He'll continue to do a great job representing, the Kansas City area. You're right, a candidate who has long-term ran on a Republican platform in that area was not chosen by the Republican committee to be the Republican on the ballot. He went out and garnered signatures to run as an independent in that race. And ultimately, that helps the Democrats. Matter of fact, the Democratic candidate's husband signed the petition to put Mr. Turk on the ballot. So
are you going to make sure the money's there to win that race?
We, the Missouri Senate Campaign Committee, as you know, under our new finance laws, cannot coordinate and will not coordinate with the Sirpoy campaign. But I can tell you,
money independently.
On behalf of our senators, Senator Richard and I, and our whole caucus, we've talked about it just in the last week, we will be out trying to make sure the people in that district understand the differences between the candidates and who we think is best to move Missouri economically forward, create jobs, take care of our health care issues, and we believe there'll be a stark contrast when we get done promoting that.
Let's talk about another business issue. It came out that the Housing and Urban Development out of the federal government said part of a bill you passed dealing with discrimination law could put funds in jeopardy. Now, these are federal funds that come to the state. If they go to every state, Missouri should get their share, I assume. Is there a fix to this that you can do in the legislative session to alleviate these concerns?
Well, Senate Bill 43, which was a very good and fair business bill that was passed that still protects Missourians' rights to file a discrimination claim, but obviously makes the standard a little bit tougher, so just not anybody can do it. I believe, federal government has said there could be some jeopardy. I think there's somewhat of a talking point and some political talking points going on with that. I know Governor Greitens has had his Department of Labor, Mrs. Cavender specifically, working with the HUD to make sure that we understand what their concerns are, what the issues are. To answer your question, I think we'll get that ironed out.
Did the governor get some bad advice on this?
No, I don't think so. I think the governor probably looked at, I can't tell you I talked to him personally about this issue, but I think on all issues, he's, as you know, very mission oriented, and he looks at what all the impacts are, and he is absolutely committed to growing our state's economy and growing the opportunities that Missourians have here, and I think he had all that in mind.
Let's talk about another issue. Senator Chappell-Nadal came out and said she hoped for the assassination of the president. It's my understanding that she went and called every senator, discussed her intentions to be a little slower on her tweets and on social media. You pushed for her to leave quite early on. She did it again. She came back this week and compared the President of the United States to Adolf Hitler. Obviously very insulting to the German-American community, but the Jewish community. At what point do you step up and say you have to handle this problem?
Well, I'm very disappointed. As you know, not only myself, but members and leadership of the Democrat and the Republican Party called for her to resign after the first comment with the assassination. When we were in veto session, the Constitution does not allow us to contemplate removal of a member. It did allow us to censure her, which I was the one who filed that resolution. And I will tell you that after this week's tweet, I was hopeful that the senator would do what I've asked her to do, which was be a leader in the community, be a healer, do not be a divider. I don't think, even though there is a group, I'm sure, that supports some of her comments, for the most part, Missourians, including the people in her senatorial district, in the 14th senatorial district, want things that move Missouri forward. They want things that unite us and not divide us. And these comments are very dividing. And I would tell you that this most recent comment probably is the thing that's
Are Senate
she will not
Democrats
recover
ready
from.
to step up and agree with you?
You know, I've talked to a few of my counterparts on the other side of the aisle on this issue, and they are getting very, very aggravated.
Let's talk about next session. Give me one issue that will be at the forefront of the discussion in the next legislative session.
I think you're going to see three, really, if I could just real quickly say. I think transportation will be a very broadly talked about topic in that we still have to fix this problem. We haven't fixed it yet. I think education reform will be something that you hear a lot about. Various schools, you know, I think St. Louis is ready to come out of their back into their accreditation, and kudos to the folks who have worked so hard to do that here in St. Louis City. So I think you'll see some education conversation. I think you'll see tax credit reform. There's also, as you know, the governor's had a committee on tax credit reform. They've issued a report, and policymakers will now take a look at that and find out what's appropriate, what's the right investment for Missouri tax dollars, what are we getting the best return on those investments for, and are we using that money in the right spots?
Can you make sure rural Missouri doesn't get kicked there? Some of this federal-only credit stuff seems to be, you know where those are going to go.
Well, rural Missouri is where I live. That's the 7 counties I represent as rural Missouri, but I've also was raised in St. Louis. So I have ties to both urban and rural communities, and it takes the entire state to make this work. And so, no, I would not want a lopsided hurt to come to any part of Missouri, including rural Missouri.
Let's talk about 2018. Who replaces you in the state Senate?
You know, the person who has announced he's running is Mike Bernsketter. He's a current House member, a great small business guy, great family man. Typical German Cole County, and he's related to about half of the district. But Mike is out working very hard. Some other people have thought about it and have recently announced they are not going to run. So to my knowledge, in the 7 counties, and I'm, as you know, out and about in those areas all the time, Mike is the only guy so far. There could be others that pop up.
If you endorse somebody, they almost assuredly win. Do you plan to endorse a successor?
I will be with Mike Bernsketter. He's a great guy, and I think he'll do Missourians very well. Let's
talk about your plans for 2018. Many folks have discussed before you even got into politics, when you ran the Highway Commission, that you'd be a statewide candidate. 2018, the state auditor's race is open, the U.S. Senate seat's open. Are you considering a run for office in 2018?
You know, I know one of your next guests will be David Barklage, and I think you're asking this question on his behalf. But no, I have no plans to run for anything in 2018. I'm one of those guys, I ran for office as an aggravated taxpayer, not as to be a career politician, not to climb ladders.
Wouldn't an aggravated taxpayer make a good state auditor?
Well, it could, but I think we're going to have some good candidates in that race. I think the Republican Party can win that race. And if a door opens in the future that's right for me and my family,
Sure.
which is my very first concern is my family, then I'll always take a look
But
at
for
it.
2018, you're not running for office.
I'm not running for office in 2018.
What role did being the leader in the Senate play in not running for office? Because I think it's almost impossible to do the job you do and that job. I mean, when you were gone and flooded in, the Senate never got off introduction of special guest. What role did that play in your decision making?
Well, being majority leader has certainly had its challenges in the last couple of years, and I'm sure next year will be no different. But it's also had a lot of great opportunities for me to understand how the process works. And it's kind of like the old saying, politics is like making sausage. You know it comes out, but you never really want to know what goes into it. I know a little bit more about what goes into it now, and so I think you're a little bit more cautious about what you decide to do in the future because you understand what's going to come when you make that next step.
Senator, thank you for joining us on This Week in Missouri Politics.
I'm happy to be here anytime.
We'll be right back with the aforementioned David Barklage after this.
In 2008, Republic Services acquired the Bridgeton landfill in a merger. Since then, we've invested $200 million to clean up the site and to maintain environmental compliance. We do that while staffing the facility 24/7. That's because we support permanent solutions that are safe for our neighbors and clean up the environment. We're committed to doing what's right. That's what drives us every day. We're a part of the community, and we are here for the long haul. Republic Services. We'll handle it from here.
My name is Eric Philippi. I'm a veteran, a carpenter, and a father. When Eric Greitens said he was going to change politics as usual, folks like me didn't think the first thing he'd do as governor was take dead aim at our jobs and our families' livelihoods by working to repeal prevailing wage. Call Governor Greitens. Tell him to protect prevailing wage and to protect my family, not destroy it.
Nobody likes power outages, including us. That's why Ameren, Missouri is investing in new equipment and smarter technology to reduce outages and keep pace with future needs. And it's working. We're in the top 25% in the nation for reliability. And on average, our rates are 18% lower than other Midwestern states. Making sure the power's there when you need it. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're already rolling on our opinion maker panel. David Barklage, Dean of the Republican Party. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
Nick Schroer, up-and-coming legislator. We really can't say that anymore. I think you've maybe arrived.
Yep.
When your bill is like leading KMOX, I'm not sure you can say up-and-coming anymore.
Glad to be here.
And Schweitzer, friend of the show, welcome back.
Thank you.
Please tell Mr. Callow, give him our regards.
I will.
Mindy, Mazur, welcome back to the show. I want to start with you on the health care. Republicans have promised from dog catcher to president they would get rid of Obamacare. The Senate couldn't do it. The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, finally took a step to eliminate Obamacare. Is he not just fulfilling a campaign promise?
So I think there's a few things going on here. One is, like you said, the Congress tried 3 times to repeal.
And failed.
And failed. And so now the president has his executive order this week. But the problem is, what he's trying to do is really sabotage the entire healthcare system. And he's been very transparent about that being his goal. And what I think people really want are their lawmakers and their president to work on bipartisan solutions to stabilize the healthcare market and not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
But Obamacare was not a bipartisan bill at all.
But that doesn't really matter right now because what people want is for it to be fixed. There were important pieces that were put into that. And like I said, people don't want the baby thrown out with the bathwater, which, by the way, the baby doesn't even have health care coverage right now because while everybody's been distracted by the sabotaging of the system, CHIP funding has not been reauthorized by the Congress. 9 million kids, 87,000 in Missouri. And DISH funding for hospitals. Missouri's going to get a $2.2 billion hit because of these funds not being reauthorized by the Congress here in Missouri. And that's going to hurt patients.
And Schweitzer, isn't the true genius of Obamacare? They've convinced a whole group of Americans if the government doesn't borrow money from China and give it to you for free, you can't obtain it on your own.
But
that's not what's happening. We're paying for health insurance. I pay for my health insurance, and I'm on Obamacare. And I really hope that people my age and with my, I'm in very good health, stay with Obamacare and make sure that the premiums don't skyrocket for people who are dealing with personal tragedies, huge medical bills. I know I'm healthy now, but if I become unhealthy, get cancer, I want to make sure that I have a safety net of good health insurance that I've been paying for, just like millions of other Americans.
Make sure if I can't afford Budweiser, if I can't afford Cardinal tickets, can the government just borrow money from China and pay for them for me?
Absolutely not.
I can still obtain them, though, even if the government doesn't give it to me for free.
Yeah, and that's what the free market does. You got Craigslist, you've got StubHub that you can go out and actually get those tickets affordably. And that's what the government did this week, what Donald Trump did this week, is open up the free markets to allow the states to compete against each other. And I know the Democrats are stating that, he's sabotaging healthcare, but how can you sabotage something that's already been imploding? That Democrats are even coming out and saying, look, we need to do a bipartisan approach at healthcare, which, to your point, they didn't do when Obama was in office.
David Barklage, I remember when you were working for Republicans and they were in the minority everywhere in Missouri. There's never been as many Republicans elected. Probably Obama had elected more Republicans and sold more guns than anyone in the history of the world. They all ran on getting rid of Obamacare.
Yes.
Donald J. Trump is the one that's actually doing it.
Yeah, look, I think that the midterm elections are going to be a disaster for the U.S. Senate Republicans unless they step up.
Did they
and do
come by it
something.
honestly, though, by failing?
Well, I think it's very much deserved. The narrative out there right now, as expressed by them and others, is that the perception is the Republican Party is just looking about cutting health care, not fixing it. The Democrat Party has broken it. The Republican Party is talking about, has not articulated a consistent, sort of theme about it. And unless we get back to, look, we shouldn't be replacing Obamacare with Trump care. It should be given back to the states and allow states to formulate their own care system and everything else. But the lack of leadership on both parties, the partisan debate, is screwing basically your average person, and it's going to be on the Republicans because they're the ones holding cards.
Give me a prediction here. This is just maybe the art of the deal. Maybe the president said, I'm going to cut this to force the Democrats to compromise. Does this lead to a compromise federally on health care?
I think it could. Look, we're in a historic time. Politics and their alliances are changing, and Trump is willing to go completely across the aisle to make a deal. I've always thought that was probably the one strength that he brings the presidency is him looking at the deal more than the politics. And I think that is an advantage for a president in a divided country.
Give me a prediction. Does this lead to a federal compromise?
I hope so, but we've got too many spineless career politicians in office in Congress that I doubt it will.
Amen.
Does this lead to a compromise?
I hope so, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the compromise doesn't put millions of Americans' health care at risk, and that is what I think Democrats are not willing to compromise on.
Does this lead to a compromise?
I don't think so.
I
I don't think you can compromise on this.
I think you have socialists and capitalists dug in, but Republicans on both sides of that spectrum. I don't think they can.
But Democrats' inaction is putting Americans at risk. And I'm not picking one part or the other, but I'm saying that the Democrats' inaction and the Republicans' inability to build a coalition is putting everybody at risk on health care.
That's not true. You've got bipartisan bills that folks are working on in the Senate. You've got the Lamar Alexander bill. That's a bipartisan bill. There are senators that are willing to work together, but
Does
they're
this
getting
help
thwarted
them
and
pass
undermined by
it?
the
It is
president who
more-
wants to sabotage Obamacare.
I think the Democrats have been more about wanting to score points back against Republicans who took it out on them 8 years. And I think you've seen that by Schumer and the politicalization of this. That's my view.
Let's talk about another political issue. We talked about Senator Kehoe. The Housing and Urban Development said, we're going to cut your money because of the Senate bill. I think there's probably a way to pass. There were folks that said this is just like the federal standard. Well, the federal government doesn't agree with that, obviously.
Right.
Is there a legislative fix? And does this become an issue of should the governor maybe be in Missouri more to manage the staff that review these bills?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We had information in April that this could lead to lack of HUD funding coming through to Missouri. And so we've known this. It was a political move to support this in general. I think it's a good lesson for Missouri that bills that discriminate against our citizens are not going to be favorable to the federal government, even this federal government. And so when we're losing money around housing issues that affect people in St. Louis, where I'm from, and all over the state, that's a real problem. So I hope that instead of just wondering how we can fix this, actually just getting rid of that bill, I think it probably just needs to be overturned and
Mindy,
removed.
in all fairness, the Republicans run on these issues. They promise their constituents, if you elect me, I'll pass bills like this. If you elect the Democrat they want, they overwhelmingly elect Republicans every time they hold an election.
And in their haste to do this, they've made a mistake here.
Is that the key? I think
well,
you're right.
I think that's what happened. I mean, the case is, this is a bill that, you know, frankly, in my opinion and many others, just makes it easier to discriminate against Missourians. And we know that there are serious issues that affects in people's lives. And then, bonus, guess what? We're also losing federal funding. I mean, it's just a bad deal.
This was done quickly. There were people that had serious issues with the bill. Is this not an issue where somebody should have advised the governor, hey, if we do this, this could be in jeopardy? Or did they advise him that it can be fixed next session?
Well, I don't think it was done quickly. It was a bill that was filed in December that went through the process for quite some time, and it was passed near the end of session.
You guys held it for a long time. The Senate passed it relatively early in session.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, this is a situation where we have bureaucrats in D.C. trying to usurp state laws and tell us what we need to do. Bureaucrats in D.C. should be interpreting the laws, or passing the laws and following the laws, not interpreting them. That's what we're happening here. I've been on both sides of these issues. I've tried cases on both sides of the plaintiff side, the defense side, and this was a very important bill that's going to protect small businesses. It's going to protect families in the state of Missouri, but while at the same time, from frivolous lawsuits, while at the same time allowing for avenues when there is discrimination. I've never seen this HUD letter when the bill came up, and I think I heard.
Should you have?
Well, I should have.
Should that have been made public?
I think so.
On?
I absolutely think so. And if I'll have to examine this to see if it's something that we need to sit down and take a look at. But I'm highly offended that we've got D.C. bureaucrats once again overstepping the bounds when we have rights within the state of Missouri. And to me, this is going directly toward the corruption in D.C. that we need to clear up, that Trump indicated that he was going to clear up when he was elected.
David, is this a legislative fix? And if they do fix it, is this much ado about nothing?
Yeah, I think it's a freshman mistake. I think it's fixable. And I think that you see this in first terms. You can't hold over staff, so most staff's new. You get a new governor, and these kind of things come up. The real fortitude in it is going to be if they reach out and fix it. So
let's talk about a proposal you have, Representative. Made big news, especially in St. Louis. There's been a lot of protests. Some of the protests have come into blocking city streets. An interstate. You've come up with a bill to make stiffer penalties on folks that block traffic for protesting reasons. What's going to be in the bill you ultimately file?
Well, backing up a bit, when this all happened in 2014, it happened in my hometown, Ferguson, Missouri. And when I saw Highway 70 blocked just shy of St. Charles County, where my previous law firm was, and then again this year, and Highway 70 runs directly through my district. Now this year 64 was blocked, which runs in my district.
We would know it as Fardy.
It's Fardy?
Right? Highway Fardy, yeah.
So this is a situation which does hit home to me. It hits my district. It hits the state of Missouri, which, Highway 70, the oldest interstate in the nation, was blocked back in 2014. You've got interstate commerce, intrastate commerce, and the public safety of Missourians at risk here. This is a law that's already on the books that is illegal to impede traffic. So the reason we have laws in the first place and penalties is deter criminal behavior, deter a certain type of behavior which we have deemed that puts Missourians at risk. And when we see situations like in Boston where first responders had to operate on somebody in the back of an ambulance because the highway was blocked, they couldn't get to the hospital, this is something we need to take a fresh look at.
And Schweitzer, I have something in my sizable hillbilly gut tells me you disagree.
I strongly disagree. And this bill is not about traffic. This bill will be about making it. We already have a group of people in St. Louis, black people, who feel like the government is against them, that there are people who will make their lives harder based on their general existence in the world.
A lot of white
so
people
here
agree
you
with that
have
too.
a lot of white people agree with that too, but I'm going to say black people because I think that's what we really need to be focusing on right now. And they are putting their lives at risk to go on the highway to get attention, to get your attention, to make sure that people in government decide that maybe it does matter that black people aren't shot by the police. Maybe it does matter that there are laws that protect them. Maybe Senate Bill 43 is completely ridiculous to make it harder to have housing
so it's okay
in
for
Missouri.
Them to do that instead of...
Missouri's really good at protecting the white guy.
Well, let's look at
really
Planned
good at it.
Parenthood.
And we have a really
Let's
hard
look at
time
Planned
making
Parenthood.
sure that black people are protected. And when they go on the highway to get your attention and your response is like, let's make the penalties higher. We feel already victimized by the law, so let's make it harder to be black.
Supreme Court's
Well,
already
there
dealt
has
with
to
this
be-
situation. When
There
it
has to
comes,
be some rule of law, you'd say. Right?
There's a misdemeanor. You don't need to give these people felonies. You don't think there are
Well,
enough
this is still a
people who are
proposal.
getting, yes. And I think
this
that you'll have a
pass?
lot of other things to do.
You made predictions this pass.
It could pass, but I think it would be better if efforts were pointed towards coming up with policy solutions that actually start getting at the issues that people are protesting about. I think there's a law in the book, and raising the penalties doesn't
David, you could
address
do
that.
both, but I think this would be wildly popular in the legislature, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's talk about the U.S. Senate race. Do you have some polling this week?
Yeah, I think one of the discerning things for Claire McCaskill is that in polling that we just saw statewide is that she has only a 14 hard reelect. And that's someone that's been in the U.S. Senate for 11 years and been statewide before that. So going into an election with an intensity level at only 14% is very problematic. Her reelection is upside down. It's not in the territory that you would want to be. Claire has not won by the positives of reelecting herself. She sort of, in many respects, I think, is closer to a Hillary Clinton candidate, that it's got to be more negative about the other side. So I think in Missouri, the change in Missouri, her reputation, the game she played last time, and the luck that she's had of having, Todd Akin on the ballot, I think that this is going to be an interesting cycle, whether it's Cortland Sykes or whether it's Josh Hawley or whatever. I think that she's going to have very tough, or Ed Martin. She's going to have a very tough reelection. Then that's what the numbers show.
Next door, there's only one candidate that he's mentioned has been to Butler County. That's Claire McCaskill. Mm-hmm. She does get around the state, and I think she's far more likable than Hillary Clinton, which is not a huge compliment, but still.
But you still have the corrupt career politician aspect to this, and you have people like Paul Kurtman, you have Josh Hawley, strong constitutional conservatives, young constitutional conservatives that are finally getting out there,
How do you say that
and not
when
Todd
you have
Akin.
a leader of your party that made the ladder's ad? And isn't corrupt career politician just the lingo of the unserious?
Well, when you've been there for longer than I've been alive, and the only time that you pull towards the right are in election years, and she's gotten away with it too long, and now you finally have people that are going to put her feet to the fire.
Oh, Mindy, I mean, I think she knows Mazur very well.
Yes.
And it is an opposite party president. I think people that count her out are probably making a mistake.
I think that's true. I mean, this is going to be an interesting race to watch no matter what. It almost always is when it comes to these types of races in Missouri, with some exceptions. She's done like 43 town halls.
45 now.
Yeah.
45 across the state. She knows Missouri. Missouri knows her. Even if they don't agree with her, they respect her for being a straight shooter. And Josh Hawley literally did an ad about not ladder climbing, and here he is one year in.
I don't think that's enough,
running.
though, to get her reelected is the thing.
Well, let me
not
ask you
with
this.
these voters,
We only have
not with their attitudes.
enough time for who won the week, so who did?
Well, I wanted to say that Mike Kehoe is definitely a leader and a potential candidate in the future. But I think I'll go with Nate Walker, who nailed it on the head of hitting the NFL owners for putting at risk their economic model by allowing these protests, and the economic model that politicians funded these stadiums because of believing that it would be
Always on message
good
for his clients. Who won the week?
I think President Trump at bringing affordable care to Missourians and to Americans by opening the free markets.
Who won the week?
St. Louis Young Democrats for getting Mayor Creason to a town hall, and Claire McCaskill for raising almost $3 million.
Who won the week?
I'm going to go personal and say my husband, Jeff Mazur, who not only turned 40 this week, but also was able to accept a national award on behalf of Launch Code from MIT for innovation and inclusivity in tech.
To Jeff Mazur, and I will say Mike Parson. He led on, obviously, Lieutenant Governor Parson led on expelling Senator Chappell-Nadal, and he was proven right, I think, this week. And we will see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you by Spire and Sterling Bank.